Hello class, sorry I couldn't be there today, but hopefully this video will do a good enough job at explaining the lesson today. It's not a too difficult lesson. I think you guys will breeze through the homework pretty fast. We are starting our new unit on circles, and today is all about the vocabulary. Okay, so there's quite a bit of vocabulary that we need to go over, so we'll just jump right in explaining these quick notes. The first word I'd like to go over actually isn't even written on these quick notes just because I ran out of space. But I do want to talk about the center of a circle. Okay, now there is a point on every circle in the center that we call the center. So looking at this circle on the right here, the center of this circle would be this point right here that's called O. Okay, so the center is in the middle of the circle. Okay, now we're going to jump over here looking at this left diagram. The next vocabulary word I want to talk about is diameter. Some of you might already know what the diameter is, but the diameter is a line that starts on one end of the circle, goes to another end of the circle, and it has to go through the center. Okay, so the diameter has to go through the center of a circle. Okay, then we have a radius, which is actually half of a diameter. Okay, so the radius goes from one point on the circle to the center of the circle. Okay, so diameter from one point of the circle to the other point of the circle, but it does go through the center. And then radius goes from any point to the center. Okay, half the diameter is the radius. And then we have what's called a chord. Now, a chord is very similar to the diameter. Okay, the only difference between chord and diameter is a chord still starts and stops on the circle, but it does not have to go through the center. Okay, so the diameter does have to go through the center. A chord does not need to go through the center. All right, and then we have a tangent line. So this line out here is our tangent line. Okay, a tangent line is a line that touches a circle, but it only touches it at one point. Okay, so if we're looking at this line, it does only touch at this point right here. Okay, tangent lines only touch circles at one point. That point we call the point of tangency. Okay, there are other types of lines that we'll get into, but for right now, we just need to focus on tangent lines. Okay, only touches one point at the point of tangency. All right, so there's a lot of vocabulary on the circle itself, but then we're going to talk about arcs. Okay, so looking over here at this diagram, got a couple different arcs. We've got like what this yellow arc is, and then we've got what this green arc is. Okay, so the yellow arc here, okay, is what we call a minor arc. Okay, a minor arc is less than 180 degrees. And then the green arc is what we call a major arc. Okay, it is more than 180 degrees. Now there is a third type of arc. It's less common, and we don't really call it an arc, but it is a semicircle that is 180 degrees. Okay, so semicircle would be like if I had a arc that was halfway around this circle. This would be a semicircle. It's exactly 180 degrees. Okay. Minor arcs are denoted by two letters. So if I was going to talk about this minor arc, I would just call this AB, or I could call it BA. Order doesn't really matter, but we just denote it by two different letters. A major arc, so the big arcs, we have to denote with three letters. So B, C, A is how we would write that. It's shown right here with this little arc symbol above it. That's for both the small one and the big one. Okay. Now that we've talked about arcs, the other vocab word is a central angle. Okay, a central angle is an angle that is made using the center of a circle. Okay, so the angle AOB would be a central angle because it uses the center of the circle. Okay, Now, arc measures are given by their corresponding central angle measures. Okay, what that means is if I have a central angle like AOB, this angle measurement is the length of this arc, okay, or the measure of that arc. So if this is 20 degrees, then the measure of this arc is also 20. If this is 57, then the measure of this arc is 57. Okay, so those correspond to each other. And that's always true for central angles, but it has to be a central angle. It has to touch the center of that circle. Okay? Now that's really all the vocabulary and all the new stuff that we're going to learn today. Okay, so the biggest thing is we have to memorize all of these words and what they mean. Okay, so let's jump into some examples here. Example 1, identify the highlighted part of the circle O or P shown below. So the highlighted part, it's a little small, but it's right here. That's the highlighted thing. Okay, I just need to know what that's called. We talked about that. It's actually not on the quick notes, but we do know that this is the center of that circle. Okay. And that's my answer. Okay, that's all it's asking me for. It's trying to see if I know these vocabulary words. That is the center of a circle. Okay, that's what's highlighted. Okay, let's go down to question 2. Identify the highlighted part. So this line is what's highlighted. Okay, it wants to know what this line is called. This is on my quick notes. Okay, it looks like this line right here. It's a line that only touches the circle at one point, right? It touches this circle here at one point, and it touches this circle here at one point. So this is what we call a tangent line. Okay, and that's my answer. All right, question 3. Which of the angles below is a central angle? Okay, well, I could be talking about a couple different angles here. Central angle meaning it uses the center, and it is an angle, right? So one possible angle could be this right here, right? COX could be the angle it's talking about. Or it could be talking about YOX. Both of those use the center, right? So it could be COX or YOX. Okay, so I look for the one that is included. YOX is there, so that's my answer. But they could have chosen to put COX as one of these answers here. So there's multiple here, just choose the one that obviously they give you. Okay? All right, question 4, name the highlighted arc. Okay, here's my arc right here. First off, this is a major arc because it is bigger than 180 degrees, right? So if I go back to my quick notes, major arcs, I need to say 3 letters. Okay, those 3 letters, it always needs to include the start point and the end point. Okay, now that being said, I could start at M and I could end at Y, right? Or I could go the other way, meaning I start at Y and go to M. Okay, so one possible name for this arc would be MAY. Okay, that is one name. Now I chose to include A, but you don't have to include the A. You could choose to include Z instead. So you could have said MZY. Okay, that's another possible answer. But like I said, we could have gone the other direction. So we could have started at Y and gone this way. So that being said, my answer could have been YZM. Or I also could have chosen to use A instead of Z, so it would have been YAM. Okay. So any of these are acceptable answers. I did forget to write all the arc symbols above these, so all of these have a little arc that goes above it that I was forgetting to write. But we need to put that arc there. As long as you choose one of these, your homework will accept it. So you don't need to do all of them like I just did, but choose one of them. I just wanted to show you that there's lots of different answers that you could put here. Okay. All right, question 5, name the highlighted arc. So here's my arc down here. All right, this is a minor arc, right? It's not greater, or I mean, it's less than 180 degrees, so it's a minor arc. So I only need 2 letters to talk about this one. So I could call this CT, or I could call this TC. Doesn't really matter, but it is a minor arc, so we only need the 2 letters, not 3 letters, okay? Another thing I want to quickly talk about, because this is a minor arc, right? CT is obvious as like what I'm talking about, right? If I was saying C to T, you wouldn't go all the way around to go from C to T, okay? That's why we only need 2 letters. But in a major arc like this up here, if I had just labeled this arc YM, or excuse me, MY, then you might have gone this direction, right? But because I gave 3 letters, like M, A, Y, that gave you a direction to go. M, A, Y. That shows you that I have to go all the way around. I'm not just talking about this short distance here. Okay, that's why major arcs have 3 letters, but minor arcs only have 2. Okay. All right, let's label this one here. So I could start at K or I could start at X, doesn't really matter. I'll start at X for this one. So I'll say X is my starting point. I just need to pick one of these inside points. I'll say H, because why not? And then my end point would be K. So this arc could be called XHK. Could choose another one, but we just need to find one that fits. That's what I'm going to call this arc. Okay, question 6. In the circle J, we have the measure of HJK is 92. So that means that this angle, HJK, this angle right here, is 92 degrees. Okay? Find the measure of the minor arc HK. So I'm trying to find this distance right here. Now, if I go back to my quick notes, it says that the arc measures are always given by their corresponding central angle measures. So if I know what this central angle is, I also know how long this arc is. Okay, so I do know how big this central angle is. It's 92 degrees, which means the measure of the arc HK is also 92. Okay, because I do have a central angle, okay, so I do know that this is also 92 here. And then question 7, I know that the arc CE is 46 degrees, so this arc right here is 46. And I need to find the measure of the angle CDE. So CDE, I need to find this. Well, this is a central angle because it uses the center of the circle. So I do know that the measure of angle CDE is also 46 degrees. Okay. And that's it. Okay. Not too bad. As long as you know those vocabulary words, it should fly by pretty fast. Okay, so check your understanding. Here's a picture here. You just need to tell me 2 chords here, find a radius, tell me what you would call that radius, find an example of 2 major arcs, find a point of tangency, and find a semicircle. So just looking at here, tell me where those would be. Okay. And then this here, we're going to assume that PD is the diameter because that's what it says to do. You need to find all of these arcs, what their value is, and then you need to tell me whether that's a major, minor, or semicircle. Okay? So remember, arcs have the same measure as the central angles. And to find some of these, you're going to have to remember those angle relationships that we've talked about in the past, such as supplementary angles, vertical angles, maybe, different angles like that. Okay, so see if you can find what these angles are, and that's going to help you find how long the arcs are. Okay. Then, when you get done with your check your understanding, you are going to hop onto Delta Math. So today's homework, and today's homework only, is going to be on Delta Math. Okay? So you're going to log on, you're going to do those questions. There are a couple of review questions, okay? And they're on the quadratic formula. So I'm going to tell you the quadratic formula in case you've forgotten it. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Okay? That is your quadratic formula. Remember that when you're solving quadratics, you always have two answers, right? Because we have a plus version and a minus version. So there should always be two answers that you're putting in. Okay? The other thing to watch out for is not all of your equations are going to be in standard form. Okay? You're going to have to put them in standard form, which means you have to make sure that the equation equals 0 before you find A, B, and C, okay, to plug into this formula here. But hopefully this assignment won't be too difficult for you. Email me or let me know if you have any questions. And yeah.